Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Wilder Ride Listener's Lounge. This is our sidecast to our main podcast where instead of looking at a movie 1 minute at a time, we bring in a guest and we chat about their life 1 moment at a time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders.
I am your co-host, Walt Murray.
And Walt, this is going to be another one of our Bring Back a Blast from the Past. And I don't mean that in terms of age. I mean that in terms of ratings and in terms of audience participation. We are going to have an FBI agent once again joining us here on the program in just about 10 minutes.
Yeah, last time he was here, we got the Vietnam story and some other stuff, which was pretty awesome. But I had several people reach out to me and say, hey, I want to hear about the true crime stuff, the wiles of being an FBI agent. So I asked my dad if he would come back and join us for that portion of his life, and he graciously said, "I have nothing better to do." So he's coming back and joining us tonight.
Excellent. We are looking forward to having George Murray back with us, former FBI agent. And we just had Memorial Day a few episodes back, and so a reminder that he did, in fact, serve. Obviously, we still have him with us, but lost comrades along the way, which you mentioned, Walt, in the episode. And so it's going to be great to have him back with us. In the meantime, what's been going on with you since we last chatted?
Man, it has been a crazy week. COVID, which I don't even really like to talk about on the show because it's such a bummer, but COVID has been, has affected all of us. Well, one of the things that it shut down was the court system. And so all these trials and contested divorces and, I do some criminal work and I do a lot of civil work, has just been shut down. I mean, we've held some Zoom hearings and some things like that, but that's about it. Well, they just announced that everything is reopening at the end of June, beginning of July. And so now I have all my clients calling me in a panic saying, we've got to go find this witness. We got to get these interviews done. We got to get these accident scenes and crime scenes documented. So my life is about to get really bonkers, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Well, and that's just something where everyone's playing catch up as we're getting back to, quote, normalcy. The wild thing about this is the number of people who still want to act like we should still be locked up, still under some weird pandemic. And we're starting to see the fringes, as is always the case. You've had people out there who ignored it from the very beginning. And now you've got people who are still thinking it's just now hit and they need to wait, another year or two before they decide to come outside and see their shadow and decide if there's, 6 more years of lockdown. So I think it's interesting to watch the human dynamic that's taking place right before us. I mean, we're living through, whether we like it or not, a historic event.
Yeah, it's definitely a historic event. Definitely not anything that we've seen in our lifetime. I would imagine probably not our parents' lifetime, and maybe since the early 1900s.
Yeah. Since the Spanish flu about 100 years ago.
Yeah. So, and of course, they didn't have cell phones and Zoom calls and stuff like that. So
no, thank goodness.
Yeah. I wish I'd had the foresight to ask my grandparents what it was like, but they may have even been too young. You're talking like 1909, 1910 when the last giant pandemic went through. So it's kind of crazy. We're going through something that we have no precedent for.
Now, I know we don't get into we try very hard not to brush into the politics of the day, but are you as amazed as I am that the information that we know was being at least attempted to be put out at the beginning of the pandemic, we're finding out here we are a year later, was intentionally being squashed or silenced or pushed back in favor of a kind of a global, this is the story we're going with, and that's all we're going to tell. I mean, I find that actually alarming. At least we're finding it out, but it took for a year for a lot of this information to come out.
Yeah, I was actually one of the things that I'll talk about in the What We're Watching section is World War II in color.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they get into is propaganda. And let me tell you, some of what was coming across as news is just pure propaganda. And I think that we all need to take a hard look at what we were digesting and what was being fed to us. And we should probably be really pissed off at some of the stuff that we were told, some of the people who were saying it. And, kudos to one of the news networks that I generally bash on pretty hard when given the opportunity. But NBC has stepped up this week and really started asking some hard questions to politicians that they don't normally ask them to, in this realm and some other realms too. So I'm hoping that I think basically, Fox News is kind of in the tank for the right, and some of the others are in the tank for the left. I hope that they will really start taking this seriously and say, we need to ask hard questions no matter who the politician is, whether we like them, support them, they give us kudos or not.
No, I would like to see that happen. I would like to think that there'd be, at least in my mind, again, I'm not picking sides. I don't want anybody to think that we're moving into that direction in terms of just content, but to at least acknowledge there were different versions of what people thought was happening, and there were different ways of interpreting and different bits of information. We should have been given a wide swath of information rather than only one size fits all. And then when they went all in on that, they completely shut down the dialogue. And I think that's always a danger, no matter what side you're on, when the dialogue is being shut down and locked down and told, these are the only talking points you're allowed to talk about. Otherwise, we're just going to label you a lunatic or a conspiracy theorist or a fringe character in this story. That to me should be the big wake up is, hey, we should always be striving for more options, more information, and that way we can go through it all rather than settle on one and then it ends up being either wrong or whatever, and now we're still being force fed it, and that's wrong to me.
Didn't you get the sense at one point during this whole thing that you had both sides going, no, I'm following the science. No, I'm following the science. No, I'm following the science. But nobody wanting the public to be able to make a decision on which side was following the science.
Right. I feel like, here's what I think. Ego today is as a horrible thing as it's ever been in humankind. And when your ego has already been invested in, I have the answer, this is it, and then it turns out to be wrong, you can't admit it. And so you just go all in, dig your heels in, and that's not productive, period.
Well, and that's why if you're a news source, if your job is to report news. Don't report opinion. Don't tell me what you think about something. Report the news. You'll have a lot less to apologize for later.
Right.
Because I find that my opinion at times, not often, but every once in a while, I'm wrong. And I don't like coming back and saying, hey, guess what? I screwed this one up.
My wife will repeatedly demonstrate when I have erred. She will put it on Facebook and Twitter. She'll make sure to mention it at the next birthday gathering or whatever. I am constantly being flouted in public for my mistakes. Guess who has to live up to it? I have to go, you're right. First of all, those are the hardest words to say to somebody else. You were right, followed by I was wrong.
Yeah, that's tough. And how about having to do that on the national news and going, hey, we were telling people to wear 14 masks and all that really does is give you gingivitis, and it doesn't really prevent any diseases.
Right. The big one that got me is the hydroxychloroquine in the Z-Pack that was known to be a great therapeutic to use. It was like everything else. It's not a 100% guarantee, but the fact is it could have been used a lot more early on, but because it was considered based on sources of where it came from as a lunatic idea, it immediately got dismissed. And then you come to find out all this stuff is like, oh yeah, no, that works. Well, for 14 months we were told, no, that's stupid. Only kooks think that. So that's my problem. It's you limited the conversation, and there was a therapeutic that could have been tried. How many lives might have been able to be spared? We don't know. And again, it's not 100%, but We eliminated an option, and that is a bad thing.
Well, and one thing that I hated about the whole thing is that each side would take the smallest example of
Are you suggesting
craziness on the
cherry
other
picking?
side. Yeah, a little bit. And just blow it up to be, well, if you follow that idea, then you're going to drink stuff out of your fish tank and it's going to kill you. And it's
Next
like, no,
thing you know, you're injecting chlorine.
right. Nobody's doing that. That's insane. You know, give me a break. So it just kills the ability to have a discussion.
Well, and I'm hoping, I had no idea this topic was going to go this way, by the way. There's no rehearsal as we make our way through these episodes. I really do hope that there is
I doing all afternoon?
You were watching a bad movie.
Well, that is true.
I'm hoping, and maybe it's a little bit naive still of me, which I don't think I should be, but that at the very least, there's going to be that moment of everybody going, okay, wait a second. It was something to be, concerned about. It was a world stage event, still is technically, but we have got to make sure we don't fall for hype and this kind of like lockdown of narrative, because no matter what the discussion is, you're going to have a problem when you censor or limit who's allowed to talk or who's allowed to bring an idea forward. And that's the concern I have, because what happens, because we've been living with germs and viruses and you name whatever the next crisis, it doesn't have to be biological. We've been living with that since mankind first kind of crawled out of the primordial ooze and reached up to the heavens, right? So
yeah,
we want to make sure that we're moving forward in a positive way. And if we're locking down dialogue and we're locking down opinion and discussion, that's not the positive way to go. That's all I was going to
say. One of the things that we need to demand is that different voices be heard. Some of them you're not going to like. Some of them may sound crazy, but the ability of people to communicate is somewhat what this country was built on.
Exactly.
And the First Amendment is the right to free speech.
Yes.
So
funny. It's in the very first one.
Fathers prioritized that.
Yeah. They wanted to make sure that was the single most important one. That's why it was first. They knew they were going to have this Bill of Rights, but what was the first one? It had to do with freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to gather, freedom of the press. They wanted to make sure that everybody in this brand new experiment called capitalism and the republic that we are, that nobody would be afraid of their government. They should be allowed to do what they want, say what they want, and not be afraid they'd be locked up overnight for having a different opinion.
And frankly, I don't have to care about the things that you care about, and you don't have to care about the things that I care about. We can have our own priorities in life and not be dictated by a government or by a small minority.
Exactly. Well, okay, that was longer than I thought, and I think that covers everything, because now that we're going to go ahead and talk about we should all be individuals and not worry about big government, let's go ahead and bring in an FBI guy. How about that?
Right, the guy who's been spying on us.
So let's go, and hey, everyone, put your hands together, and let's welcome to our stage former FBI agent George Murray. George, hey, welcome back to the Wilder Ride. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Well, you heard in the green room back there, we had all those snacks and everything for you. Hopefully you got yourself a nice beverage and all warmed up. I want to get you to weigh in a little bit on what we're talking about. Since we had you before, we don't have to talk about where you came from, what you did. We already know. Anybody who missed it can go listen to the previous episode from last season. But what are your thoughts now that we're here 15, 16, 17 months after pandemic starts, finding out how much information was in fact locked down?
Well, of course, I listened to what y'all had to say, and pretty much agree with it. The founding principle here is the right for speech, the right to talk, the right to have an opinion. Now, I'll expand a little bit on what you guys. What happens with guys like me? The FBI is a hobby. It's a fun thing. Whodunit, solving problems. So all through this pandemic, I've gone back to my early days in the military of a course called Chemical, Biological, Radiological Warfare.
Mm-hmm.
1965, I went through a 2-week course at Fort Benning. Listen to that. So this is just biological warfare. They're developing this stuff. Did it escape? Or did they toss it up in the air and say, let's just see what happens? So if you want conspiracy theories, guys like me can come up with conspiracy theories that'll shock you. I don't think it's beyond belief, because we know that the Wuhan lab is a viral testing lab for all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting the possibility of that. Now, that's only a theory. I doubt if we'll ever know, because the Chinese government's not going to open and tell us what happened.
No, unfortunately, and I've mentioned this in my the other hat I wear, where I'm on talk radio. They're a communist government, and as much as we want to pretend that in our movies and in our literature we can just say, "Oh well, they're okay," there is a specific thing about communism that they're okay lying to everybody.
Yes, yeah, you're right on the money with that one.
And subjecting everyone.
Yeah,
Subjecting or subjugating?
Yes, that.
See, I'm subjected to your nonsense, but the Chinese subjugate their people.
That's right. You're correct.
And to emphasize what you're saying, the Chinese government has all these Muslims out in Western China that who knows what they're doing to those poor people.
Right.
So I think that as you guys are discussing this, but a positive point of view from this is we probably passed the test. We had a president that shoved through a vaccine, and as much as they want to keep saying there are variants that could infect us, it appears the vaccine will fight off just about anything. So, listening to what you guys had to say, I couldn't agree more, and I expanded a little bit.
Okay. No, it's good. I'll just dovetail on I don't want anyone to think that Walt or I or anybody here doesn't think that there was a virus. That, of course, there was. We'll know more as weeks and months and years go by as to how much was engineered versus what might have spontaneously happened. But the fact of the matter is, you're right, George. We had a focused administration, whether you liked it or not, decided we're going to put the might of the American government into a vaccine, and we got one out in less than 1 calendar year, which has never been done in all of human history.
Unbelievable. I'm old enough to have experienced polio. In my early childhood, they closed the swimming pools because they were being attacked with polio, and no one knew what was going on with that. And bingo, Jonas Salk came up with a cure for it, which as kids, I got a shot. Most people got it as a little cube with
the sugar cube.
In it. You swallow the cube and it stopped it.
Mm-hmm.
So, America is amazing. You think of what we've done. And I know y'all have had on the great astronaut who's sitting up on the space station. Can you? My dad would never believe this. He was born in 1912 and was a pilot, but he would not believe that we've got a space station circling the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
America is the greatest country in the world.
And how about just in all of our lives, we now have a private partnership with the Space Administration putting our astronauts on that International Space Station.
Yeah, there you go.
How crazy. And it's awesome, I think.
That's great. Yeah, I agree with you there.
It is. It's amazing. And we live in the greatest country in the world in the most astounding time in history, to be honest, because of what we're doing technologically, the fact that we can come out with a vaccine for probably what is a virus that was created in a lab to destroy and kill, and do it in a record amount of time. It really is amazing to think of.
All right. Well, let us go ahead and drive the discussion now to our guest. I wanted to just kind of get an overall opinion on that because you have seen a lot in your career. You again, for those folks who didn't catch the previous time that our guest was with us in season 3, I suggest you go back. It's fantastic getting the history and from the beginning, joining the military, being in aviation, the helicopter crash he walked away from, and then a career in the FBI. We're going to talk more about FBI and in general some of the more fun stories, but let's remind everybody quickly. The FBI was your second career. That was after Vietnam.
Correct. But it was my ambition from the 7th grade.
I've heard a lot of the stories, but how did you become interested in the FBI? You grew up in Mississippi, which the state of Mississippi is known as maybe not being as friendly towards the federal government as some other places around the country. What got your interest in that?
Well, in the 7th grade, I attended a Presbyterian church Sunday evening youth event. And the reason I was a Baptist, the reason I went to the Presbyterian is my girlfriend went there and they had food. And unbelievably, an FBI agent assigned to the Jackson, Mississippi office spoke. I heard him speak and said, "That's it. That's what I want to do." And of course, in my time, the requirements to be an FBI agent were a college degree with either a degree in accounting or law. And I went to Mississippi State for an accounting degree, and you had to have 3 years beyond college of management experience. Guess what? ROTC and a second lieutenant gave me that experience. And then, of course, they convinced me that I needed to fly around in a crazy machine called a helicopter. But that's what got me into the Bureau.
You joined the Bureau in 1968.
Yeah, you should know the date.
Yeah. Well, it's bad. It was so long ago that I had to think for a second because I was actually born while you were in training. But there's one thing that you've always said that was a historical event, that your class was the first class that didn't have to do a particular thing or really wear a particular item when you went through training.
I'll answer the question in reverse. We had to wear a suit, white shirt only, and a conservative tie. The class ahead of us had to go out and buy a hat, a dress hat. Our class was the first one allowed not to. And of course, things have changed so much today. The kids are going to work in golf shirts and blue jeans. So that's throughout society. But the Bureau actually followed an IBM protocol of dress for success. And it was effective. When you walk in to talk to a bad guy, yeah, he's impressed. But if you walk into the local bank or local newspaper or a government office, the suit was mandatory.
Mm. Well, and of course, J. Edgar Hoover was the director at the time. And I know for a lot of people today, they may not even know who J. Edgar Hoover was. But what was J. Edgar Hoover to the Bureau at the time, Dad?
Well, he was the Bureau. He started the Bureau in the 1920s as the Bureau of Investigation. It grew from a simple investigative arm of the Justice Department, and Hoover drove it into carrying weapons. We began without weapons until several agents were killed doing investigations, and Hoover got Congress to approve weapon carrying. By the time I came in the Bureau, we were going to training school at the Marine Corps base at Quantico and using Marine barracks for training. On that site, they built the current FBI Academy.
And at the time, y'all were using the 38, the Smith & Wesson Model 29, is that right?
Model 10.
Model 10.
A 4-inch barrel 38 that the Bureau, being a very conservative organization, didn't spend much money. They were leftover Army 38s. So some of them weren't real accurate. I ended up right away buying my own weapon.
Yeah, why was that?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I went through training school, and I just come out of the military, been firing pistols for years, and I nearly flunked out of training school because I couldn't hit anything with the pistol. I get to the first office in Springfield. I'm on the firing line, and the instructor there says, "Something's wrong." He said, "Let me see that gun." So he went down, and he had just fired a perfect score the day before with his weapon. He goes down and fires a 78. So we shipped it back to Bureau headquarters, and somehow the barrel was bent, is the explanation I got. So that was when I said, I'm going to go buy my own gun. And from there, I bought a Model 19 that I carried the rest of the tour.
So what was when you joined the Bureau, of course, they shipped you out to Springfield, Illinois. What were the first types of cases that you started working on?
Well, as a young agent, you're basically working criminal cases, and you're usually out with an older agent. After a few weeks, they realize you're not a crazy and you've got enough sense to take care of yourself. You would end up working everything from applicant investigations up through criminal matters, a lot of bank robberies, a lot of fugitive cases. In those days, local law enforcement could ask for help and still can. And the Bureau will file paperwork, and we'd chase fugitives all over the world for them, as in the Martin Luther King case when they went to London and brought back James Earl Ray. So I came into the Bureau in March of '68, and Martin Luther King, of course, was assassinated. That was the biggest case going at the time. We covered leads everywhere looking for James Earl Ray, and he had gotten out of the country and was in England. That's where he was extradited from.
You know, I asked this the last time, but I want to recap it because it does have to do with the FBI. And Walt, I know he and I are both hoping that the rumors of a season 3 of Mindhunter will be actually now greenlit. But one of the things that I thought was incredible about watching that Netflix series was this was the same time the Bureau still was tinkering with, and a lot of people didn't believe in, psychology in terms of going after certain profiles, and especially when it came to serial criminals or serial killers. What was that like? If you can, since we got more time to talk about the FBI side, watching sort of that element of FBI and forensic investigation developing from the psychological profiling to starting to really interviewing previous serial killers to try to figure out how to catch the next one.
That came about early on in my career, and it's really common sense advanced. You take a look at the situation, and then the analysis done by behavioral science is very good stuff. Here's an example. Missing and murdered children occurred in the early 80s in Atlanta. Black children were just disappearing off the street. We were finding them floating in rivers, discarded in open fields all over the Atlanta area. And because it was Black children, because we're in the South, guys like me who had grown up in the South kept saying it's a Ku Klux Klan. It has to be the Klan. However, behavioral science took a look at the case and said, no, it's got to be someone who can go into that community and not be identified.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, turned out to be Wayne Williams, who grew up in the community, was an Afro-American, and blended right into the community and was picking these children off and killing them all over the place.
Now, the thing about the Wayne Williams, for those folks who may be younger and they don't know about the Atlanta child murders, there were a lot of missing children, but as far as I remember, he was only convicted on 2, and all the rest were still left as either unsolved or in, I guess, cold case files now.
Yeah, that's accurate. And the reason is because they had enough evidence in those 2 cases that they felt they could convict him, and they did. Williams was a very sharp guy, is a very sharp guy. He's still incarcerated. Many of the cases had very little evidence in them, and some of those cases actually were families that had done away with the kids, and those cases never were proved, never were taken to court. A lot of the kids were just runaways that fell apart on the street. But Wayne was convicted on the 2, and behavioral science played a big, big role in his trial. He, throughout the trial, that no one knew whether he was going to testify. And behavioral science told the prosecutors, if he gets on the stand, he's going to be very defensive. He'll be a very convincing witness. But if you get very close to him on the stand and get in his space, see what happens. Well, they did exactly that. He exploded on the stand and started yelling and screaming. And that was a big point in the jury decision, we think. In fact, a lot of the jurors said they thought of him as, hey, it couldn't possibly, until they saw his real personality come out. So behavioral science is a monster crime solver, as you alluded to, going in and interviewing the serial killers. And we compared that to twisting their head off and looking inside for the snakes, because you're looking for what makes a guy or a woman, what makes a person kill so easily. And behavioral science did a monstrously good job there.
Since that, and the reason I wanted to bring that up, and I love giving the texture that you're bringing to it, the sense was, and I'm watching a TV show, you were there. The sense was it wasn't proven when it was first being brought into the Bureau, and so there was resistance. What was your opinion watching? You said it was common sense, but basically on steroids, if you will. But what was your experience watching behavioral sciences start to have actual legitimate techniques, and then watching those agents go from skepticism to embracing that kind of style?
You describe it very accurately. There was a lot of resistance, even guys like me, and I consider myself very open-minded to this, anything that will help us solve crime. But all of us thought, come on. We can do these interviews as well as you can, but all you got to do is go through a little bit of the training and be around this. And you realize that they are defining characteristics of bad guys that we've all observed, we all know about, but the ability to use that characteristic and get them to confess to different things. I later in my career, an undercover operation that we took down, several of the people taken down in the operation were not cooperative, but behavioral science told us beforehand, when you go in to do this interview, you ask these specific questions that focus on their personality, and bingo, we were getting confessions we couldn't believe.
I think that's incredible. I mean, Walt, I know that's why you and I loved the show, because it was based off of the writings of the actual FBI agent that's being portrayed. So I'm hoping that it does get picked up, because this is fascinating to me to hear about the culture and the evolution of this crime fighting technique.
Well, in a lot of ways, I guess it changed the way that y'all approached investigations with, I guess on some level, it kind of took it into a more professional and modern way of doing investigations. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be very accurate. Investigations, from my point of view, are an art form. If you, and Walt, you can associate with this, there's really nothing in concrete. Your art, you got to think about it, come up with good ideas, come up with new ways to do things, better ways to do them. If you just follow the same procedures over and over, you're not going to be that successful.
Well, I know during the Wayne Williams case, that is really, for me, I think the first big case I remember you working on and understanding a little bit more of what law enforcement was about and what your job was about. People always ask me, what was it like to grow up with your dad as an FBI agent? And one of the things that I've said was, other than completely insane, I remember I think it was my buddy Brian, whose dad was a veterinarian who lived up the street, was over for dinner, and you came in from work and took your gun off and put it up on top of the refrigerator and sat down for dinner. And he leaned over and said, "Your dad carries a gun." And I remember thinking, doesn't everybody's dad carry a gun? I mean, isn't that what dads do? And so it was a really different way to grow up. But I remember during that Wayne Williams investigation, kind of coming around and understanding a little bit of that. But there were some crazy things that happened during that investigation as well that that you ended up getting involved in, and probably a little bit less glamorous than some other work of the FBI. But you got involved in some of the surveillance stuff in that investigation. And I know people always ask me about that. So could you just elaborate on some of that?
Well, to kind of start that off, Wayne was bagged first on the bridge over the Chattahoochee River up on the edge of Fulton and Cobb County, where the bridge goes over the Chattahoochee, and he threw the body over into the water. Now, taking it back, the idea, we knew this killer was dumping the bodies in the Chattahoochee or any river around, and the opinion always was that it washed the bodies, it took away any fibers, any fingerprints, anything that might lead to him. So we were working this case, putting guys under the bridges and on top of the bridges. So you got two trainees from the Atlanta Police Department sitting in the bushes by the river under the bridge, and two senior agents. It was an Atlanta SWAT guy and I sitting on top of the bridge. And the guys underneath were to call if they heard a splash, and we'd grab whatever was on the bridge. Well, I was on there the Saturday and Sunday night before they got Wayne on Tuesday night. I was on that bridge over the Chattahoochee, and all kind of crazy things happened during that. There was a redneck bar down the road where guys came out and fired their pistol down into the river. I guess after a few beers, you got to, clean your gun. So you fire the river.
Make sure it still works.
Like other dads carrying guns.
Right.
But Wayne got bagged on the bridge, and they had heard the splash, but the body didn't come up. It submerged. They couldn't find a body. And this is the middle of the night, about 2 a.m. So they got him, and out of the back of the car, they take a roll of rug, but they have to let him go because they just don't have enough to hold him. So that rug eventually convicted him because that's where the fibers came from. They matched the fibers inside his house, matched hairs and fibers off the children. I think Luby Jeter may be the guy that splashed that night. And so we go after Wayne, and in the time from that splash to his arrest was a couple of weeks, and we had 24-hour surveillance on Wayne. And because I had aviation time, Atlanta had one pilot at the time, so we had to have two guys in the airplane. The idea was if one guy had to fly and one guy did the surveillance work, and if Brownie fell asleep or died at the controls, I could probably get the airplane down. So Wayne was smart. He had a CB radio, and he would drive down by the airport because he did not think we could follow him from the air at the airport because it'd disrupt traffic. But all that would happen is Wayne went through there. We called Atlanta approach control and said, "This is Zulu." And they said, "All traffic hold." And you'd see Delta doing circles as we went through the traffic pattern at Atlanta Airport, following Wayne. Well, eventually they arrested him as, he was convicted and he's in prison still.
Well, the other thing I remember happening in the middle of that is the Atlanta FBI hostage situation. And, there's all kinds of insanity around that. But if I remember right, there were a couple of folks at the office working on the investigation, and then a guy came in and took a bunch of hostages.
Yes.
Let me break in here, because for somebody who actually just moved to Atlanta in 85, having paid attention to the Wayne Williams case and the Atlanta child murders going, oh, look where we're moving to from Detroit. I had no knowledge of what this hostage situation is in the midst of this. So can you kind of set the stage for those folks who may have never heard about this before?
Okay, we were in a building at the Peachtree Baker intersection in downtown. It's now a hotel. At that time, we were on the 9th and 10th floor. IRS had the lower floors. And because of the missing and murdered children, we had agents and support employees in from all over the nation. And that Sunday afternoon, there were 9 people inside the office, 2 clerical employees we knew, and then 7 kids from D.C. who were doing computer work on the Wayne Williams case. This was before we even knew who he was. A guy named Morris Roberts got off of his medication, walked out of Georgia Regional. He was a mental case. He showed up at the front door, and a GSA guard answered the front door, and this kid's got a Ingram submachine gun pointed at him and wants to go to the FBI office. So he takes the guard up on the elevator, knocks on the door, and Cheryl looks through the door and sees the guard and pops the door open. Now he's got 9 hostages. And he wants a gunfight with an agent in the middle of Peachtree Street. Quick draw gunfight. That's his demand.
Like the Old West.
Like the Old West. So this, I come home from church, and there's a female agent waiting at my house saying, jump in, we've got to go, take any gun you've got. So the only supplement I had was a duck shotgun, a 12 gauge Remington 28-inch barrel. So we tear downtown. Long story short, as the day goes by, we had a psychiatrist there listening, trying to negotiate with this guy, and the guy's reading the clock backwards. He's making all kind of crazy statements. The psychiatrist tells our boss, John Glover, he's going to kill your hostages. You need to take him out now. So I'm in one of the hallways behind the door with 2 or 3 other guys. Our door got locked by the subject, so we couldn't get in. But I hear the call, SWAT, kill him now. That's a pretty strong.
That's a strong statement.
And the SWAT team leader replies, say again, number 1. And he says, you heard me. The first man who gets a shot, I want him down. Okay. About 5 minutes later, he got hit with about 25 rounds.
Wow. Put himself in a position for either the SWAT or a sniper to get him.
Yeah, he walked down the hall pushing one of the hostages and walked by an elevator shaft that had the air conditioning vents in it. And we had 3 guys behind it, 1 Atlanta police officer and 2 agents, M2 carbine, 2 pistols, and a submachine gun.
Wow.
And he was down right away. One hostage got a round in the fanny as he ran away. And when he retired, we turned that spent round over to him. We had gotten it from the doctor that took it out of his fanny. None of us were hurt. It was melancholy. I ended up interviewing the grandmother of this subject. 2 of us went out to her house. We were trying to figure out what the heck was going on. What was this all about? And she said, we've had trouble with him through the years. He obviously stopped taking his medication, and they found his medication in his room at Georgia Regional. He had just come off the medication and just went crazy. So this is the hard thing about mental illness. You really, really don't know what people are going to do.
Did you guys, okay, so was there any indication on the following up after why he decided he wanted to target the FBI, why he wanted a quick draw duel on Peachtree Street? I mean, what was there any indication what his mental illness was telling him?
No. And the doctors that were interviewed that had dealt with him could not tell us either. Just a mental breakdown, and suddenly there was some indication, though. When he came in, he had a ham sandwich, a pistol, an Ingram submachine gun, which is not well known, but it's a fast firing submachine gun, 9mm, that has an open bolt starter. So we got his submachine gun, and he had a shotgun. Heavily armed, lots of ammunition on him when we took him down, but again, no real reason.
Wow.
Let me throw something at you. Since I want to come to a current FBI case, Colonial Pipeline.
All right.
If you want to pay attention to the news, you'll notice that the Bureau is going to get some credit, I don't know how much, for solving this case and recovering some of the loot. I am going crazy. I want to know how they did that, because for guys like me, the computer is a mystery. And cybercrime, and you've got hackers that can do all this stuff. I can get on Zoom. I can do things like that, but I can't even imagine.
Well, Walt can get on Zoom. I mean, that's not really impressive.
Right. A blind monkey could get on Zoom.
Well, I don't know. Don't say that, because I deal with veterans groups, and we have guys all the time that are scared to death of Zoom.
Well, here's the two things I'll add about what I know about the Colonial Pipeline. Two things that I think are worth mentioning for our friends who are younger that are listening, who think Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is the be-all, end-all because it's untraceable, it's perfect, and you can keep it, and once you have it, it's yours. Somehow the FBI got $2.4 million worth of it back from the Russian hackers, so there's not as much security around it as you think. Second, the CEO admits almost everybody who could have run that pipeline manually, we had let go because they were too old or retired. And now I'm thinking, isn't that the problem in our current society, where we let all of the intellectual capital of people who we've invested in for decades with a company, we go, now you're too expensive, we're letting you go. Those guys knew how to operate the pipeline manually. We would have never had that issue had we kept even just a handful of those resources as contractors or as consultants.
Interesting. I didn't know that part of it. That is cool.
I was blown away. I mean, basically, you had a bunch of younger people who were all into the technology. They had a guy who hacked it. I don't know if you heard this. It wasn't a hack like some, Mission Impossible. What they did is they found an account of a guy who had a virtual private network, an ID and a password that had never been shut off. Somebody who was not even with the company anymore, but it was an active account. They just logged in with that VPN ID and password, and they were in as if they were an employee of Colonial Pipeline.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, the good news about that is it inconvenienced some people, but guys like me paid no attention to it. I drove to Destin and went to the beach. We discussed it and decided if we run out of gas, we'll sleep on the side of the road, but we're going to Florida. So the thing all of these problems are learning experiences that will serve us well with hackers and the Bitcoin problem and all that. I love Bitcoin. I'd love to know more about it, but things move so fast in today's society. Even young people don't understand the Bitcoin thing.
Well, let me ask this, because in light of the question you brought up about Colonial Pipeline, the FBI is also not immune to the idea of, we've got people who have been here for 30 years, 40 years. They don't understand political correctness as it exists today. They don't understand the Me Too. We have to get rid and purge that, quote, old dead weight in favor of new, more nimble, more sophisticated ways of investigating crime. But the fact of the matter is, you're letting that intellectual capital go. And that kind of experience you don't just get because you went to a class.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I think the Bureau may be smarter than that. The current director, Ray, is a guy that all of us know well. He's a great prosecutor. That's what he did early on in his career. And he's a good guy. I think he has enough sense not to let all of that go. And you hit the Me Too movement and all this stuff. This is all a problem, but it's the same problem we've always had. There's always some problem you've got to overcome. You just got to figure out how to get around these problems and hold on to your intellectual property.
Well, that was my biggest concern, and maybe I'm hearing too much of the spin of those who were upset that the FBI is involved with maybe not prosecuting certain evidence, let's say a laptop that was sitting in someone's warehouse or in someone's repair shop, because it might embarrass somebody up the chain. And so you start going, well, do these agents know? Were they just too young? Were they so easily manipulated? You don't know. And you start feeling like, well, is Christopher Wray really running the FBI the way we want the FBI run?
You've got a good point. And I can't answer your question. I have the same concern you do. Of course, everyone that's listening knows what case you're talking about. And it goes also, we're looking at January 6th so heavily, but we've got all of this stuff going on last summer, burning the cities in Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis. Okay, there's a lot of people ought to be going to jail over that. Well, slowly, if you pay attention to the news media, you'll see some arrests coming out of those. Now, some of those arrests are going to be local, and the dirtbag, the subjects, the bad guys who do this, not the dirtbags. That's a reference to the old bureau. The perpetrators doing this stuff, we'll get them eventually. Bad guys do it over and over. They don't just do it one time. That's the good thing about behavioral science. That's how behavioral science works. Here's the great behavioral science story given to me by Hazelwood, who is a writer of The Evil That Men Do. Roy Hazelwood was early on one of the guys in behavioral science with the Bureau. Hazelwood got a call from NYPD, New York PD. They had a major homicide rape. A girl was raped in the stairwell of a New York tenement and dismembered right in the hall, right in the stairwell. So they go to the crime scene, of course, work the crime scene. They can do nothing. They can't come up with anything. So then they send the photographs up to behavioral science. Behavioral science says, there's a picture of her earrings. Did y'all move those? And they said, no. We took the pictures. They were on that edge of that stairwell, placed away from the body and everything else. Behavioral science said, the subject you want is a mental case who just got out of the penitentiary within the last 6 months. Go back through the building and see, is there anybody that y'all interviewed that fits that description? Bingo. One guy fit that description. They got a confession.
How did a picture of earrings away from the body on the staircase lead them to that idea?
There is a theory of, here is one thing out of the entire crime scene that is very neatly put aside for who knows what reason. I mean, again, we're looking through the ear holes here trying to figure this guy out. But at crime scenes like that, disorganized crime scenes with one organized thing at the crime scene, and they're looking at it as a mental case. Now, would that work every time? Probably not, but it was a lead. Hey, do you have anybody that fits this description? 6 months out of the mental institution, and he's in the same building with this woman. And they never knew why he did it. He just did it.
Wow.
So, yeah, you're right. Your discussion of behavioral science is right up my alley. I love that stuff. Love it.
I'm a psych major from way back in college and never really pursued it, but I've always been interested in human psychology and the psychology of what leads people to think, act, and do things, and in their head justify it. And I think it's fascinating. I want to circle back around, use that phrase from some other areas of our government, but I do want to circle to, the thing I'm worried about, and you mentioned the FBI, hanging on to its people and not necessarily hopefully being too short-sighted, but we've seen politics take control of areas like public health, of journalism. And I know with my dad having been career Army, he said there are two kind of generals. You've got your politicians and your warriors. The warriors fight your battles, but your politicians live in Washington. Is the FBI not same kind of entity subject to this current culture we're in where politics plays more importantly than the law or finding the bad guy?
I'll answer that question, and that I can't completely answer it, but politics is in everything. In the J. Edgar Hoover days, they advertised that the Bureau was a non-political operation, wasn't influenced by politics, and Hoover was able to keep a lot of politics out of it. But J. Edgar Hoover was a political genius. You've heard all the stories. If you wanted to oppose him, he probably had something on you. So politics have always been there.
But I guess when I was a kid growing up, the politics was about, hey, we're going to be the powerful agency that gets what we want. Now it feels like we're going to spin the stories the way we think they need to go, which I think is different.
I'll agree with that. I will not defend the FBI and try to tell you it's a non-political animal. Again, FBI, just like me, are ferociously defend the Bureau. That's why I brought up Colonial Pipeline, because that's a demonstration of they're doing something.
Oh, yeah.
You start. We worry about the politics too. My generation of guys sit around and talk about this, and we cuss Christopher Wray and talk. Are you stupid? Why would you do it that way? Why not? Well, the big question is, why are you not all over Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and all these others? And the politics spin it. And that's where your spin is.
Now, I'll help you as well, because I am a huge supporter of, because I have a friend of mine who's a pilot for the FBI. I know a lot of people in law enforcement. I would love to believe, because I still think this is true, that the overwhelming majority, I'd say 98% plus of your field agents, your hardworking, come into work every single day, they're trying to do the best they can to put the bad guys away. It's just the 2% at the top that sometimes sullies the image of what the rest of the folks are doing.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And Jim Comey would be the best example of that. Comey betrayed the Bureau terribly. It's unbelievable what he did. And some of us feel so strongly about it that he really doesn't want to meet us on the street. I mean, it's just disgusting how he could do that. And of course, the whole thing with this is the director of the FBI, other than one case, beyond Hoover, is not an FBI agent. Louis Freeh came up through the rank. He's been through training school and was the director at one point. And of course, we cussed him too, because he didn't do everything the way I wanted it done. So it's the job is very demanding, physically, mentally challenging, but so much fun. I cannot tell you how much fun I had. It's just beyond belief.
Well, I know one story that I always enjoy telling is you had worked undercover for several years, and probably longer than most undercover operations, but y'all wrapped it up at a restaurant. And I always enjoy the story of how you wrapped this case up. So can you tell us a little bit about the case and the undercover, and then how y'all managed to wrap that one up?
Yeah, I did a total of 7 years under, and it was a what we call a soft undercover, because I lived right here in Atlanta, and we ran the operation out of here. It was Operation Nickel Ride, and we started off just buying stolen cars, and then we got into buying a little dope, and then we got into some corruption. We all of a sudden were thrown with some local police officials who we realized right away were showing up at a lot of places that we were doing undercover work. And we found out that they would take money to do certain things like entering the NCIC computer and giving us information out of that computer that is 100% illegal. And we were paying them a couple of $100 to run your name through the computer. And they'd come back and give us strips of paper right off of the computer network. So that, along with a lot of narcotics charges, we charged about 35 people, and we rented a place called Tony's Restaurant down on Paces Ferry. It's now, I think, an Italian restaurant known as Prisi's, but it was Tony's Restaurant, and we'd in and out of there a lot. So we set up this big party, invited all the people we wanted to arrest to the party, and we were going to give away trips to Hawaii, lots of drawings, just all kind of things to get people there. Sure enough, we end up with a ton of people there that night, and we had agents inside in tuxedos. We had female agents dressed to the nines, and somewhere along the line at the end of the night, we had limousines, and we were arresting guys. We'd take them out to the limousine and tell them they were going to meet our boss, the big Don from New York City, who was down to enjoy the party, but he was over at another location, but he wanted to meet you. So we'd put him in a limousine and drive him over to a place called the Lenox Inn on Lenox Road. It was an old motel that's no longer there, right beside Houston's restaurant. And when we got there, it'd snatch him out of the car and arrest him. So we had arrested about 20 of these turkeys that way. And by this time, guys are looking around, where's my buddy Joe? So it's time now to take the whole thing down. So my partner gets up and does the drawing. And when he's doing the drawing, all right, everybody put your hands on the table. And we had agents right at every table. I disarmed one of the local police officials who was sitting there looking at a kilo of cocaine we had just bought from him. So it was a huge takedown, got a lot of press out of the thing. And you would think that would compromise my undercover. But I came back into the office and returned to normal duty. And they said, you're going back undercover. We have a white collar crime one for you. And we end up all over the country arresting political officials on corruption cases.
Wow.
So the undercover, your mother did not like at all.
Yes, I'm well aware of that.
You're well aware of that. It's very trying. You guys are looking at a normal, average, everyday guy who worries about baseball, golf, and things like that. But in those days, my hair was dyed blonde. I had a mustache and always had a cigar in my mouth.
Mm.
And we bought airplanes, cars, dope, you name it.
Stolen video games.
Yeah, more fun than you can stand.
Well, I just remember in one of those cases that, I try to explain this world to people. And there's something called a federal nexus, that you can't make an arrest necessarily unless they violate a federal law. And one of my favorite surveillance pictures is an arrest that you made at Kennesaw Mountain. Why did you make an arrest at Kennesaw Mountain?
Well, I had an informant who was a big-time car thief, and he was lining up cars for us, and we'd bring in 7, 8 cars at a time out of Florida, other places. So he comes up with this deal that he's going to bring 10 cars from Tennessee. Well, at the last minute, we find out they're not from Tennessee. They're from just across the Tennessee line in Georgia. So there's no federal violation. And we couldn't bring the local authorities in because none of them knew who our undercover operators were. So we decided to bring them to the national park because it's a federal violation called crime on a government reservation. So we took them down in the national park, and as luck would have it, the local authorities took over the case. Cobb County ended up prosecuting everybody. But
that's awesome.
You had to do something like this because I could not compromise our informant. He was giving us all this stuff just constantly. And on one of those, they arrested us. We set it up so that we had to be arrested too, to cover the informant. And some young, smart-ass FBI agent handcuffs me behind my back and nearly separated my shoulder. So and the kid didn't even know I was the undercover. They were just arresting everybody. And I'm like, look, you knucklehead. So there's a lot of stories out of that. It was fun. Again, it's a challenging world, but it was great fun. The political corruption cases were a big deal because we did one in California. I got to hear Robin Williams live, which Robin Williams is the greatest entertainer I've ever heard.
Yeah, and that one was that the one where the guy was basically taking a bribe to vote to allow nuclear waste to be dumped somewhere or something like that?
That's the one you're talking about. It's in Greensboro, North Carolina. We told him that we were building a plant that had nuclear waste with it. And he said, I don't care. I want the money. I don't care if it turns everybody black. Because we told him the nuclear waste would kill people and turn them black. And he was before the jury. We tried the case. And when that testimony came out, you could see the guilty on the faces of all the jurors. So
yeah, I'm sure.
There were a lot. The undercover cases are being worked today. Undercovers are done all over the world, and they're a very effective law enforcement tool. They're devastating psychologically to the undercover agents. You have to be really careful. And there was, in my day, very little supervision of us. Do you feel okay? Yeah, I feel fine. Nowadays, there's a lot of psychological work that's done with the agents to be sure that their head's still on straight.
Mm. So when you look at a movie like Donnie Brasco, how accurate is that to the undercover world?
It's pretty accurate. Brasco is a guy we all know. Brasco was doing undercover just ahead of me, and he grew up in the neighborhood where that undercover work was going on, and he was doing a mob-related thing. And Brasco was faced with a situation where he was going to have to kill somebody to maintain his legend. So Brasco's movie is pretty accurate.
Wow.
He's still living under a different name because the mob has a long memory.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's funny because we're talking to you. You've been undercover. You've mentioned some of these stories. Are you in a position where you're not worried about the things you've done undercover to bust whatever?
I've run into 2 or 3 people that I arrested. Walt's mother and I were having dinner down in Virginia Highlands with another couple one night, and we had to wait outside the restaurant for a table. And I see this guy across the street looking. And he comes walking across the street, and I'm like, oh, he's coming. And I've got a weapon. I had a weapon in my pocket, luckily. And as he's coming over, I'm racking my brain. I cannot figure out who he is. And he said, are you an FBI agent? I said, yep, that's right. He said, you know what? You arrested me on a bank robbery. I said, really? I will have to admit I've arrested a lot of people on bank robberies, and he said, yes, sir. He said, you did, and you saved my life. He said, I did my time in prison. I'm out now. I'm working, and I'll never do that shit again. And I said,
good.
Well, thank you.
There you go.
Of course, Walt's mom is like, oh, geez. Yes. And because the other couple is just, they can't believe it. Tootsie grabbed him and drug him in the restaurant. She realized what was going on when she heard the first part of the statement. She drug him in the restaurant. Leave him out here with him. I don't know what's going on. So yeah, there's a little concern, but I've been retired a long time, and I keep up with a lot of the guys we dealt with. And some of them have passed away. So no, I'm not really worried.
Gotcha.
Probably more worried about Atlanta traffic.
I do want to bring up something. You brought up Colonial Pipeline for the recording of this podcast is pretty recent. How much do you know or were aware with, and this is an example of the FBI doing a phenomenal job of creating the fake, supposed crypto anonymous messaging website that criminals were being encouraged to use called Anam, just so they could have this. platform, they thought, oh, look, we can use this as our messaging. We can talk about all the things we're going to do and the people, and there's no way for them to track us. And it was actually an FBI created chat messaging tool to help ensnare these folks, and have so far 800 arrests since then.
I'm impressed to no end. It's the ultimate undercover operation. I just love it. I wish I was younger. I wish I had been involved in that part of it. I'd love to know how they did that. And who came up with the idea? Because taking you back to the Wayne Williams case, we were following old investigative techniques. A young FBI agent, I'll come up with his name in a minute, came up with this idea to stake out under the bridges using Atlanta police trainees. And we're all like, come on, there's enough bridges in Atlanta. But he sat down and looked at the pattern that this guy had created and came up with about 6 bridges for us to sit on. And it was all done by a guy who was a brand new agent. He had been an Atlanta police officer before. He's buried in the cemetery in McDonough. He later was involved in an airplane crash. But the thinking that went into the creation of this pipeline thing is just wonderful. I'd love to meet the people who did it.
I think it's incredible because let me ask this, because it does sort of tie into undercover work. They specifically created it and then recruited and tried to convince criminals via undercover agents, this is the tool to use. So that means they had to establish some period of time they were going to allow criminal activity to occur to convince maybe bigger fish, oh, this is a legitimate tool that they will never track us. And yet it was all FBI. So something like that, how long, I mean, I know maybe you won't know the detail, but on average, how long would you normally need to let something like that percolate and let, I guess, bad guys get away with it for a while to sort of ensnare the bigger fish later?
That's the real conundrum you face. You refer to the Danny Brasco case. He was tasked to kill somebody for the mob. And you've got a problem. There's no way you can do that one. But there is certain crime that you can let them commit. And you've got to document this stuff completely for later litigation. You know, a good defense attorney is going to attack that area you're talking about. Hey, you let my guy steal a car, cross the state line with stolen property, do all kind of things. And you've got to be able to document that it was done in furtherance of a better result.
Gotcha. So
yeah, because Lord knows he wasn't on his way to go commit that crime without your help.
The place you get into a lot of problems with that is buying guns for them, buying weapons. And we've done it before, bought a weapon, and they don't realize there's not a firing pin in it. And it came from our lab, tricked out. So, of course, you realize bad guys don't go to the range and practice. So we were always pretty confident they weren't going to try the gun out before they really needed it.
Well, I think just in general, as we're going a little long on the interview, but I'm just sitting here like in awe of the stories. This story that I wanted to bring up, I don't want anybody to think that I'm anti-FBI just because I talked about the politics earlier. I love law enforcement. I am so back the blue in all capacities. I think the reason I bring up the politics is it bothers me when you have just a handful of people that can sully the image of so many people who are working this hard. I mean, the idea of creating an entire crypto, sort of an encoded messaging system, selling the idea that it's unbreakable, it's unhackable, nobody knows who's talking to anybody, and yet it was done by the FBI from the very beginning, I think is awesome.
And I agree. I wish I'd been there.
Walt, I know we got to move on to some of our other segments, but I also know that we didn't touch on all the stories I think you were hoping we could touch. So I'll let you drive a little bit more here because I'm sitting here saying I could make a movie out of half this stuff.
Well, I mean, there are so many crazy things that I remember over the years, but in the 24 and a half years that you were an FBI agent, did you ever fire your weapon?
No.
Wow.
I had, I'll give LAPD a kudo here. LAPD came up with the idea of SWAT, which is Special Weapons and Tactics. The Bureau grabbed it. So we had 5-man teams that were designated for high incidence, dangerous situations. I was an early SWATter because I had the Vietnam experience and had a lot of weapon training. And we had a prison right at Atlanta where the prison was taken over by the Cuban refugees, and they were holding the hostages in the prison yard, wanting the gates opened, and they had a shiv to the throat of several of the hostages, a shiv being a homemade knife. And I was on Walt on Tower 9 with a rifle, and I'm asking for the shot. The shooter can't take the shot without authorization from the boss. Weldon Kennedy was the boss that day. And I'm calling for the shot. I've got him. I've got his eyeball. I can take him now. And they kept going, hold, hold, hold. And I can still see the guy's face today through the scope. And I didn't fire. He saw the weapon. Looking up at Tower 9, he saw the weapon, dropped the shiv, and ran.
Wow.
So I came close a number of times, but no, never fired the weapon.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I think one thing that people forget sometimes, it's a glamorous business, but it's also a dangerous business. But you also don't have too many of those times where you are doing the quick draw in the middle of Peachtree Street to try to end a crisis. But what would you say? I know we talked a little bit about this last time, but what would you say to somebody who's considering a job with the FBI now?
I've been asked that question, and I highly recommend it. I will tell you up front that it's demanding. You're going to get transferred wherever they tell you to go. You don't have a choice. They tell you to go to New York City or Paris, you're going, or you're going to resign. So it's a hardcore thing, but the training is great fun. I mean, you can fly around in helicopters and rappel out of helicopters and shoot guns and just on and on. And then you can get involved in these operations. A lot of my work was white collar crime. We worked a case on a guy who was actually taking people for money because he convinced them he had a machine that would turn pig manure into gold. And people were paying him money to be involved in that venture. So you've got cases that are so entertaining, it's unbelievable. So yes, I would highly recommend it. But now the accounting and law is expanded to a lot of engineering disciplines, a lot of language disciplines, and some other areas that you can get your education and qualify for the Bureau.
I'm going to add, that's a great question that Walt kind of went into for our listeners, especially people looking for a change of career, or if they're younger or their parents are listening in the car. My question that I have for you as we're starting to wind down is, when it comes to the Bureau, when it comes to, just being involved in law enforcement in today's age, right now, anyway, at the time of this recording, in general, law enforcement is not being thought of as the job to go into.
Yeah, we're going to have trouble recruiting because unless you're blind and not paying attention to the news media, they want to beat up law enforcement. They want to defund all this. But all you got to do is have enough common sense to think, if we take the blue shirts off the street, the cruisers off the street in my favorite county in all the world, Cherokee County, I mean, what are you going to have? Who are you going to call? Who are you going to call when somebody's breaking in? Who are you going to call when they cash a bad check, when they shut down your computers through hacking or cybercrime? I mean, the theory, all this is right in Marxism. You're just following the Marxist trend, but you can't do that. That's not practical. You want anarchy? You can't imagine what anarchy would come about from this. So, yeah, I would have a hard time saying, "Hey, Walt Murray, go get a job with the police and stop a car at 4 a.m. With the tinted windows, and you're walking up to that car because they was speeding or throwing trash on the highway, whatever they're doing. It's dangerous stuff, and I don't know why it never was scary to me. It was just so much fun. I guess I kind of wacky, but it.
Well, I really hope that this trend is just a minor blip in our culture, and that it's going to change, because I had this very same question for a sheriff friend of mine. We live in Bartow County, which is on the outskirts of the Atlanta metro, and here's a sheriff who, in an area that is pro-police, pro-Second Amendment, pro-Constitution, still can't fit 40 or can't fill 40 positions, and has been like that for the last 18 months because people just don't want to be in law enforcement, period. And that's scary when a county that is pro all of those things can't fill the positions. What's happening in those areas that are not necessarily as pro Second Amendment or pro Constitution?
Yeah. How would you like to be on Atlanta PD about 3 years and no seniority? You're out on the street and you've got a mayor who will not back you. That's, of course, our problem is the courts. We're releasing people onto the street that have committed major crimes, and we're putting them out on no bail, no reporting. You got them coming across the border, bringing narcotics, on and on.
Mm-hmm.
It's no telling how many terrorists we've allowed into the country that would have gone and fought in Pakistan or somewhere else, but we're letting them in the United States through the southern border. So scary stuff.
And I know that's all like we can play what if. We know for a fact that fentanyl and other dangerous drugs have been just spiked in the last year. We know that. There's no doubt. That's a tangible measurement. We also know that we've seen a lot of instances of violent crime. We've seen murders up. We've seen a lot of robberies up. We've seen assaults, violent crime, especially in those areas that tend to be the get rid of the police mentality. At some point, common sense better show itself up.
Yeah. And you wonder, mama taught you common sense. Somewhere along the line, somebody or something in your head had to give you some common sense. I'm scared of people like that. They'd walk out in the street and get run over because they didn't think a car could hurt them. I mean, how do you think like that?
I don't know. And this is the closest we're coming to, quote, a political messaging, but I'm going to be pro law enforcement from the day now to the day I die. And if somebody doesn't like that, that's fine, whatever. But I am, because I do know, and I've read enough history, and I'm a student of history to know what happens when a civilization of law-abiding citizens doesn't have a mechanism to help enforce those very laws. It's great on paper, but if there's nobody out there doing the work, it's not going to last.
That's right.
Well, and I think that the reality is there are dangerous people who need to be arrested or otherwise dealt with by strong, smart people in law enforcement. And it's just a reality of our world. There are people who are going to break the law. There are going to be people who are violent. There are going to be people who are evil. And we need good police officers who will go and stand up to them. That is a reality of life. And when we start stepping on those people and stomping on them as a career over a very small percentage of bad cops that are out there, or to force an agenda, that's a problem for the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us who support law enforcement, we really have to do that more and more vocally.
Yeah, I agree. That's why that's kind of why I'm bringing it up, to be honest, because I'm thinking about the community in which I live, where my girls live now that they're on their own. If there's 40 cops that aren't being filled in a position, that's 40 officers that could be helping keep speeders off the road, help respond more quickly to the burglary or the purse snatcher. I'm not even thinking about significant violent crime. Just the simple petty crime is not being addressed because there's just not the manpower.
Well, and you realize that the petty crime is simply a precursor for the more violent crime. Once they get away with purse snatching, it's going to be car theft, it's going to be car hijacking, it's going to be gun violence.
Right.
So Rudy Giuliani, as mayor of New York, proved that the theory of you work the broken window. If Lulu calls in and says somebody broke out my window, you work that case. You figure out who broke Lulu's window, because if they got away with that, they think they can get away with burglarizing whatever.
It'll continue to escalate until they get caught. And sometimes even then they think, well, that was just one mistake. I'll go back and do it again.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Walt, I don't want to cut us off any sooner than I could literally say, let's scrap the format and keep talking. I mean, because I'm having a blast.
I'm the same way.
So what else do you got for your dad? Because I just love this kind of conversation. And I hope more and more people are having these kinds of conversations with people they know with this kind of history.
Well, I agree 100% because I know all the stories. But one last story, I guess, that I would ask you to tell, Dad. It's a little bit more of a serious story. In the mid '80s, the Bureau changed significantly with the Miami shootout, and some people are familiar with it and some people aren't, but I think that was probably the time the Bureau changed the most significantly when you were there, and may have really left an indelible mark on the Bureau. As a street agent, can you kind of tell us from your perspective and explain what that shootout was, but then also how that changed law enforcement?
Yeah, as we talked about in my training, they issued you a 38 caliber pistol, 6-shot pistol. That was your carry weapon. In the Miami situation, a team from the Bureau's bank robbery squad was trying to identify 2 perps who were robbing banks all over Miami. And these guys were going in heavily armed with AR, automatic weapons, heavy-duty pistol, and in body armor. So there was a big surveillance of a couple of banks. All of a sudden, they spot these guys. There's a running chase. Cars are wrecked, and the Bureau agents pile out with their pistols, and all of a sudden, they're faced with rifle fire. And we lost Jerry Dove and Ben Grogan right away were killed, hit by rifle fire. One of our other agents' elbow was taken off, and in the gunfire, we were able to knock down both perpetrators finally. And at the very end of it, Morales, who is one of the survivors of it, had been shot through the arm, had a shotgun, and he was able to deploy the shotgun one-handed, pump it between his legs, ejecting rounds, and kill the 2 subjects as they tried to flee. Of course, right away, there's an evaluation of what the heck? We've got guys now carrying long guns, and where were our long guns? Mm-hmm. They were locked in the office, and there was no protocol for carrying those unless there was an incident where we would go to the vault, get the gun out, return it to the vault after the operation. That changed law enforcement completely. We went from revolvers to automatic pistols. There was a long chain of different Smith & Wessons, Glocks, and up from the 9mm to the 40 calibers and then up to the 45s. SWAT now basically is carrying a 45 pistol and carrying long guns, shotguns. A big evolution in the workup of weaponry. That's throughout law enforcement. The Bureau's not the only one doing that. Everyone's doing it.
You know, Walt, as soon as you said that, I was trying to remember if this was the same thing, but if you're a fan of the movie Heat, I mean, that big scene where they robbed with the automatic weapons, I think was inspired by those 2 guys who were able to just wear the body armor and take shot after shot after shot because they knew law enforcement wasn't going to be able to drop them with the kind of gear they were wearing.
And that was a second true shootout. That was in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's okay. That's what I'm thinking of. Okay.
Yeah, and that was the one where the cops realized they were outgunned, and there was a gun store So they race into the gun store and get the guy to give them a couple of rifles and ammunition. That's how they finally knocked the guys down.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, there's a video from that of one of their officers with a shopping cart full of long guns, shotguns and rifles, pushing it out to his car to take to the shootout. And it was insane how overmatched the law enforcement folks were in both of those two shootings.
All right, yeah. So where I convoluted those two, I'm glad because now as you said LA, like, oh, that's right, it was LA. The fact of the matter is, the law enforcement, whether we like it or not, has to stay at least one step ahead of the criminals. We don't want to be playing catch up to the criminals.
Well, and we just lost 2 agents in Miami. A female agent and a male agent were shot. They were working a pedophile case. They were going to do a search warrant at this guy's house. No one had any idea he was violent. Ring doorbell. They walk up on the porch and he can see them and guns them with an automatic weapon through not an automatic weapon, a rifle, long gun through the doorway. They got hit with 223 rounds, and the girl was hit right in the head. The other agent was, I think, in the neck, but both were killed at the scene. So law enforcement's a dangerous job, and you really don't know. Here's a guy that what he was doing was really porn, kiddie porn, and all of a sudden he's shooting the place up.
Yeah. Wow. I think I asked you this last time, but I'm still going to ask it again. Are you ever going to write some of these down and have a book? Because it seems like you have a wealth of great stories to tell.
In the case of the Vietnam, there are several books that I have stories in. With Honor We Served is a book that's out on Amazon. It was written by a group of guys. There's about, I think, that 38 or 40 stories in that book. As far as the FBI stories, there's so many FBI books out there with these stories in them that they sound a lot like mine. I've written some down for Walt, for John, Ashley, when I'm gone, if they want to share them with the grandkids. But as far as publishing a book, I bet it's not going to happen.
Well, I guess this would be my last question for you. I know you've recommended some books to me over the years about the FBI and FBI agents. Which one, if you could recommend just one book for everybody to read about life as an FBI agent, which one is your favorite that you would recommend?
The oldest book, and that is a book called No Left Turn. It goes back to the Hoover days. Hoover was so paranoid that about the communists and everything that when you drove him around, you had to navigate so that you didn't make left turns. A lot of that's kind of made up, but it was a book published probably in about 65. So it's not with the current. That's a good question, Walt, and I can't answer it. I've read a lot of material. There is a female agent named Jerry Williams who does podcasts, and there's a number of podcasts about FBI cases that are available out there. A retired federal probation officer I was talking to the other day told me he had been listening to Jerry Williams' podcast, and apparently she covered a couple of cases from the Atlanta area. I haven't had a chance to look at the podcast, but that would probably be my recommendation. Look up Jerry Williams.
Cool.
I think my favorite book that you've ever recommended was one called Honk If You Love J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah, that's out there.
It's a quiet book.
Yeah, I can't remember who. Yeah, not much honking, but every FBI agent would honk. But I can't remember who wrote that, but it had just some crazy stories in it. And I guess he was an undercover guy, and he'd sit in the bar and play ukulele, and all these crazy people would come up and introduce themselves. And before he knew it, he was neck deep in all these criminals and put half of them away.
Yeah, I knew him personally. When I did an undercover in Hawaii, and he was in the office in Honolulu, and I worked with him. He later retired as San Antonio, I think. He's deceased now, and I think he did write that book.
Yeah, it's a very entertaining book.
Currently, though, everything you guys doing podcasts are taking over for the reading. I read on Kindle a lot, but your podcast is the thing to go to.
Well, and the podcast that you were referencing is called FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams.
Yeah, and Jerry is a girl, Jerri, I think.
Yep, that's it.
That may be worth checking out.
It's a lady.
We might see about getting Jerry to maybe see if she would like to come on our show.
Yeah, we may have to do that.
If somebody could just set up that contact, I don't know. Does anybody know anybody who might be able to put us in touch with her?
Yeah, maybe who might know her.
I mean, if so, I'm not suggesting you do it now, but before tomorrow, maybe.
Well, see, the problem I run into sometimes is when I say I'm George Murray's son, I get, really? Okay. I have to be careful.
Quick, hang up.
Yeah, line just went dead.
George, this has been incredible. I know when we last interviewed you, COVID was pretty much starting, and we said we'd get together and do something. I'm still going to hold Walt to it. I know there's a lot going on, but things are more back to normal than they've been in a year. We need to get together over drinks and just have some fun, because, I'm having a blast sitting here virtually. I'd rather be face-to-face.
Well, last night was the first night in 14 months that my veterans group met at a Mexican restaurant. And I sat next to a 97-year-old guy who had served in the Philippines in World War II.
Wow.
And I tell you, it was great getting back in person. You can Zoom all day long, but nothing beats this get together. So you let me know, we'll meet.
Awesome. Well, as long as there's brown liquor or clear liquor or liquor in general, I'm there.
How about barbecue? Do we need
barbecue's okay too. There's all right with
barbecue.
that.
Barbecue and beer.
Beer's fine. I'm okay. I'm an equal opportunity drinker. So, George, thank you so much for joining us. Former FBI agent, undercover agent, did so much work in sharing some of those stories with us. I can't tell you how awesome this is to have had you this evening for nearly a couple of hours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Dad.
All right. See ya.
All right. We'll let you go. Take care.
Your birthday, Walt.
All right. We'll let you drop. Walt and I got to do a few more things, but take care.
I'm going to eat hamburgers and drink a beer.
All right. Thanks, Dad. And thank Yanni for us.
All right. Yeah.
Sure
Bye-bye.
will. Bye.
All right, we knew we weren't going to be able to keep our guests, but we want to continue on with the rest of the show. We're going to cruise through this. It's just going to be you and me, Walt. So let's get to our next segment. It's a segment we like to call
God, what is this? Stop it! I gotta get me out of this house!
And you had another survey, and survey says, what did you end up watching?
Well, I ended up, thanks to our listeners, with a film called, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's called Ice Twisters. And it is, IMDb gives it a 4.1 rating, which is very generous. It's 86 minutes, and it has an aspect ratio of 1.78 to 1. And I tell you that because that may be the most interesting thing about this movie. This movie is actually filmed professionally. It's like a movie, but it sucks. And the CGI is not great. But one thing that we can start off with that is kind of interesting is the writer is a guy named Paul Burkett. Do you remember that name?
That sounds like a writer of another one we've done.
Yes, Paul wrote Arachnoquake.
Oh, okay.
And his writing skills have not improved. Now, the odd thing for this one is there are a couple of people worth mentioning in it. Mark Moses. You may not recognize the name, but you're going to recognize the face. He has been in Platoon, where he played Lieutenant Wolf. Do you remember Lieutenant Wolf from Platoon?
Not off the top of my head.
He was the guy who initially had a conscience, and then by the end of the movie, he was a chain smoker, and he was like, "I don't care. I just don't care. Don't even come to me with this kind of crap." And then he was in Mad Men. He's been in the show Homeland. He has 139 credits.
Wow.
Let me tell you what he doesn't show us in this movie. He doesn't show us that he cares, and he doesn't show us that he can act. By the time he gets into this one, I think he kind of realizes what kind of piece of garbage this was. There's also a lady named Camille Sullivan, who is the other main actor in this. She has 82 credits. She's mostly a Canadian actress, but they are skilled.
I mean, this is a
actors.
true production. I mean, this isn't some, independent where they didn't even have headshots of the
Oh,
people.
no, this is like a real movie. Yeah, I mean, this is a real movie. There's only one actor in it who doesn't have an IMDb profile that they keep active. Everybody else, I mean, it's like a real movie, but it is not good. The IMDb summary is Charlie Price, which is played by Mark Moses, a former scientist turned science fiction author, starts living one of his novels when the Federal Science Foundation's weather experiment escapes control and turns disastrous. I guess that's what happens. Basically, first, the thing that bothered me is there isn't such a thing as the Federal Science Foundation. There is a National Science Foundation, and what they do is they take grants and distribute them to people. So the Federal Science Foundation apparently is this evil federal agency that owns a bunch of drones and C-130s and goes out and creates weather. So that's where the science kind of breaks down.
Wait a minute. For a moment, I'm thinking you're telling me the legit. Now I realize, oh, okay.
No, this is where this movie goes from here.
Yeah, I see.
Paul Burkett has a weird brain. There are a lot of problems with this movie. It's not entertaining. It's really boring. And part of the problem is he actually tries to make it scientifically reasonable by having very long, boring, stilted scientific conversations between characters.
Ugh.
Nothing more exciting in a movie than long, boring, stilted conversations among scientists. I mean, there are so many times I was like, I should probably rewind to this to figure out what was going on, but I'm not even going to freaking bother. The storyline is very, very, very predictable. If you and I were sitting in the room watching it together and we kept pausing it and saying, what happens next? 9 out of 10 times we're going to get it. It's just not good. It's kind of a combination of, remember the movie Twister?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like that, The Day After Tomorrow, and overhearing a boring conversation in a tech school student center. It's just horrible. I mean, it's really just terrible. And, like I said, the CGI isn't very good. Characters get killed. You don't really care because you don't really give a crap about them at any time. There are terrible attempts at humor. One time they pull up in front of a hotel, I guess, and there's a sign that says free Wi-Fi. And one of the guys in the car goes, we really need to get hooked up to Wi-Fi. And somebody goes, hey, look right there. And it says free Wi-Fi. And the sign says free Wi-Fi, free continental breakfast. And the guy who had just said, we need Wi-Fi says, I'm not hungry. And the other guy says, no, the sign says free Wi-Fi. And then they pause for a laugh. It is that's the high point of the humor.
Did we need a laugh track to help the audience? Because that doesn't sound funny to me.
It's not funny. No, that's why. Yeah. They really probably should have had a laugh track. It's lame. It's bad at the, by the time you get to the end, if you're still paying any attention, you kind of hope everybody gets killed. And just to ensure that there's no Ice Twisters 2. However, there is also an Ice Twisters 2. But I don't think it's even on Amazon Prime. I don't know where you could even watch that. But I do not recommend this movie. I give it a 0 out of 10. It is not watchable. It is not entertaining. It is not in the least bit interesting. And I wish I had never seen it.
Wow. Another stellar choice. But remember, you give the audience our 3 to pick from in our listeners' lounge or our listeners' group.
I know. Well, and on the scale, I would say it is still better than Space Trucker Bruce or Meowie Halloween.
The Meowie
whatever.
Halloween has been your, like, you just, I went back and re-listened. You were just in pain talking about that one.
That was a painful piece of garbage to watch. This is more watchable than those, but it's still a burning sack of shit. So,
oops.
So
you said that and my camera fell off. Like, just spontaneously, I was like, all right, commit suicide.
So yeah, don't watch Ice Twisters. It's not good. It's 89 minutes of pain. Go find something else to do with your life, but not that.
All right. Remind everybody, Walt, if for the next week, where can they go to vote if they're not already a member?
Yeah, so go to our Facebook listeners group. It's facebook.com/The Wilder Ride. Join there, follow us there, and then join the listeners group. That button will pop up right behind it. And we, every week, have the listing of 3 movies that we have to choose from. For some reason, everybody chose Ice Twisters this week. And I have to subject myself to that movie and give you a review. So hopefully next week's movie will be a little bit more entertaining. This movie was so dull that I feel like the review is dull because there's just not that much to say about this garbage piece of shit. So, so give me something a little bit more to chew on next week, and we'll be back with a better review.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. You give us 3 better selections, and we will vote on the best of the 3.
It's a deal.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to our news segment. It's a chance for us to scour the internet for the craziest, wildest, and wackiest news stories we can find, and you know they're true because they're online. It's a segment we like to call...
It's No Bullshit.
You have the first story.
I have the first story, Alan. Karen, the baby name going the way of the dodo.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
Have you seen this story?
Is it because that the meme of like a woman named Karen once like went off, and now everybody that like goes off on a crazy thing is called a Karen?
You got it. This is from the New York Daily News. No one wants to name their baby girl Karen anymore. The name has tanked in popularity over the last year, according to figures released by the Social Security Administration. Throughout 2020, the name Karen fell a whopping 171 spots on the popularity list, from a low of 660 to number 831, the Huffington Post reported.
Wow. That
the
is
name's
a
popularity
drop.
had already been ebbing, falling to its lowest rank since 1929 by the end of last year. While it fell 23 spots to 660 on the list of popular baby names for 2019, it has plummeted even more since then. The parents of just 325 baby girls named their daughter Karen last year, down from 439 in 2019. In 1965, the name's peaked in popularity of nearly 33,000 newborns named Karen. That was 1965. While there's no scientific link between the name Karen and the pejorative connotation with the entitled white women who wants to speak to the manager, there's no denying the name that launched 1,000 memes is morphing into something less than desirable.
You guys suck.
How could it not? With the connotations being the Central Park Karen who falsely called police to say a black bird watcher
was accosting her with his dog.
Yes, who had accosted her with her dog. Tried to harm him. The so-called Soho Karen who wrongfully accused a black boy of stealing her cell phone, or a woman actually named Karen who refused to mask up at an Ohio grocery store. So those are all our Karens who have led to the demise of the baby named Karen.
It's no bullshit.
So that's news. That's hard news. And for some people named Karen, hard news to swallow.
Sorry. All right. Remember a couple of weeks back, I had the story about the cicadas that might be injected with a fungus that would make their butt fall off?
Yes.
I've got a follow-up.
Okay, here we go.
Well, guess what? Cicadas also have a different problem. If it's not their butts falling off, it's they may be eaten by people. And how do we know that? Because the USDA, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, just felt it necessary to put out an allergy warning related to cicadas.
Oh my gosh.
In case you didn't know, if you have a sensitivity or an allergy to seafood, which by the way, apparently run close to the cicadas in terms of the same kind of biology, you may not want to eat the cicada in case it was being offered to you.
Oh, that's not right.
Did you know there are people out there making an entire industry right now on selling food made from cicadas?
Why?
Because they're hatching. I don't know. It's something. Here's the crazy thing. As crazy as it sounds, there are people making a fortune selling chocolate-covered cicadas, cicada pies, other versions of cicada as a crazy, wacky, hey, join the Brood X. It won't be 17 years again till these all pop out. Why don't you grab a bite? Yep. So the FDA says it's important to know that because their biology, their systems are very similar to that of a lobster or a shrimp. If you have seafood allergies, be very careful if you decide to partake in any of the cicada dishes that might be made available to you.
It's no bullshit.
Ugh, that is disgusting.
Sorry, it's still in the news.
I would rather get an update on yoga cats, but
I don't know if we'll ever have a story to beat yoga cats. I mean, you set a bar so high, I can't touch it. I've been looking.
Or so low.
It's so low, I still keep tripping on it on the way to the store.
Oh, man. Well, did you know, Alan, that the Charlotte Observer has a story this week that a monster alligator was recorded wandering among homes in Myrtle Beach?
This is damn peculiar.
Ugh.
An alligator estimated at 10 feet in length came out of nowhere in a Myrtle Beach neighborhood, leaving neighbors scrambling to keep their distance.
I'm going to guess he came out of his mama's egg.
I guess so. No, that's a big egg. Multiple videos shared on Facebook show the alligator was given a wide berth as it left the roadway and walked across yards, driveways, and in one case, someone's front porch. It happened Sunday morning at the Myrtle Beach Golf and Yacht Club, and some neighbors reportedly watched while sitting in the safety of their parked cars. The club borders the Waccamaw National Wildlife Refuge. Here's a quote from Facebook. "Look what I came home to, right outside my neighbor's house. OMG." Marjorie Meek posted on Facebook. "It was so cool. He seemed so docile, but I know he wasn't. It was freaking amazing." Alligators are fierce predators. I didn't know if anybody knew that. They can grow to be 13 feet in length in South Carolina and weigh in excess of 1,000 pounds, experts say. They are not adverse to eating dogs or cats and can live more than 60 years.
Wow.
Meek gave periodic social media updates on the alligator sauntering, noting at one point, "He's on my neighbor's porch. We're trying to get hold of the neighbor so he doesn't come outside."
It's no bullshit.
Hey, neighbor, there's something on your porch. What? Whoops.
Lunch.
Have you seen how slow they move normally, but how quick they can turn and come after you when they decide that they're done? They
are not to be messed with.
It's amazing because I think people get lulled into thinking, look how slow it's moving. It's barely turning. I saw them go from like 0 to like 10 miles an hour, like just jump after somebody. I was like, whoa, that's quick.
They are frightening.
Now, I'm sure they're not built for long distances, but it doesn't matter if you get that close. They don't need to sprint but a few feet, and then they've got you.
Well, this is the thing. Like when I was in Yellowstone, they had to put up warning signs everywhere. Don't ride the buffalo. Don't approach the buffalo. Buffalo can run 30 miles an hour. Look, people, this is an alligator. Stay away from the damn alligator. The alligator can eat you. And you know what? To him, you just look like food. So stay away from the alligators.
Well, I've got the final news story, and this goes back to our stupid internet generation of people who are willing to do anything online to get likes and try to become a YouTube or TikTok or Twitter influencer. It doesn't matter. According to the headline, a 13-year-old is now hospitalized after setting herself on fire attempting a TikTok stunt. Yeah. You really shouldn't attempt something just because you saw someone do it on the internet. The all too real chances are something could go horribly, horribly wrong. In a grim reminder of the fact, a 13-year-old Destatini Crane from Portland, Oregon, was rushed to the intensive care unit. She accidentally set herself on fire attempting to recreate a stunt she saw on TikTok. On May 13th, Destatini's mother, Kimberly Crane, was chatting with her mother in the Crane's living room. Her daughter, together with one of her friends, was doing something in the bathroom. Suddenly there was screaming. Kimberly rushed to the bathroom to witness one of the most horrendous sights of her life. Everything was on fire.
Ooh.
Destatini was on fire. Things in the bathroom were on fire. It was unreal, heartbreaking. I don't think anyone wants to see their daughter on fire. Chalk that up for Captain Obvious Comment of the Year. Yes, you do not want to see any of your children literally on fire. Mrs. Crane pulled the daughter outside and managed to wrangle off her still burning shirt while a neighbor called 911. Emergency responders from Portland Fire and Rescue sped Destanini to the hospital. She did survive, but not unscathed. The girl suffered serious burns to her neck and right arm. Doctors have performed a tracheotomy on her and are now grafting skin onto those burnt areas. Ugh. Despite it all, it will most likely be months before Destanini regains mobility in her neck, arm, and fingers. Destanini hasn't been able to speak since the accident, but it's pretty clear how the events proceeded. First clues come from Destanini's sister, Andrea. She said that Destanini's friend kept screaming about how they were filming TikToks while Destanini was on fire. Secondly, there were some items in the bathroom that clarify the situation further. There was a capped bottle of rubbing alcohol sitting on the counter, and the whole side of it had been busted open, and there was a lighter as well as a broken candle.
No.
Then there was Destanini's phone on which she had been recording a video. The recording never stopped even as the bottle of alcohol exploded in the poorly ventilated bathroom.
Ugh.
Finally, Mrs. Crane said her daughter lived for TikTok. Mrs. Crane and Andrea concluded that Destatini and her friend had been trying to recreate a TikTok video that has been making the rounds lately. In it, a man sprays a figure on a bathroom mirror with hairspray before lighting it on fire.
It's amazing. It's astounding. But it's no bullshit.
No, people, no. Please stop.
Yes.
What is wrong
Stop.
with people?
Stop being stupid. You know, I had another one I could have pulled. A woman went into cardiac arrest doing the TikTok or internet challenge of trying to do the dry scoop challenge where they take like powdered protein or some kind of powdered mix and try to just swallow this powder without any liquid or putting it in the whatever material to kind of grind it up or mix it up. They're just doing a dry scoop challenge. A woman had a heart attack as a result. These are stupid. This is the generation, by the way, that votes.
Wow. That is incredible. I mean, that is incredible.
There you go. That's our news. Parents, take a look at your children.
Wow.
What did you teach them by giving them the iPad at age 4?
No kidding. Ugh.
Look, when we hurt ourselves, we at least were outside in the real world doing things like digging tunnels and throwing bottle rockets at each other and, trying to play Tron with real Frisbees or throwing, rocks at each other.
Right.
We earned our injuries. We didn't
That's
do
right.
stupid TikTok challenges. Nobody had video of us, by the way, doing it.
I am so thankful for that.
No kidding. All right. Well, we went long with our guests, so let's quickly move to our entertainment segment. And this is the segment where we just kind of give you an idea of what it is we've been watching, what, if anything, we've been reading, and what we've been listening to. Maybe give you an idea of what to try or not to try. So, Walt, we'll go to you first. We'll start with watching. What have you been watching this past week? I know one thing you texted me about last night, you completed.
Yes, I did. I completed Invincible, which I think from what you were saying, I probably liked it a little bit more than you did, but I did kind of have the same questions and I don't know if problems are the right word, but yes, some of the same annoyances that you had, I had, but probably not at the same level, but it is great. I'm not
I'll watch season 2.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
because I'm hoping my question might get answered, but so far there's nothing in season 1 that explains the problems I have with season 1.
Right, I agree with you. I don't know whether they glossed over it or we're going to get an answer in season 2.
No, I enjoyed it. I said that I binged it in 2 days when I watched it. So obviously it's engaging. But part of the reason I kept binging, I wanted to get one fundamental question answered it did not get answered.
Yeah,
So-
I was watching an episode a day. I think
Okay.
there was one day I watched 2 episodes, but I was kind of spacing it out a little bit. But it's really enjoyable. It's great animation, great story. Like you said, I will definitely be watching season 2. But well worth the time. I think it's 8 episodes. Is that right?
I think so. 8.
About 25 minutes each.
If it's 9, then okay, sue us. But it's 8 or 9. It's not very long. Each one's about an hour. But I will remind everybody, they've got these quote like end credits where if you think it's over, wait until it's actually over, because almost all of them have sort of this denouement where it tells you sort of like another piece of the story that you need to take into the next one.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it'd probably be better binged back to back. I think doing it your way was better than my way.
It did help keep the continuity flowing of the storylines. The voice acting was good. I enjoyed the animation, the throwback to the Super Friends era. I did enjoy that.
I like that too.
But there are some significant. I had like you said it perfectly. I had a few more issues. Maybe they were a little more deep in my view than you. But we'll both watch season 2. So there we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've got us both back. So,
all right. What else you been watching?
There's a great movie. Unfortunately, it's not in English, so you've got to watch it with closed captions. But this movie is really fascinating. It's called Time Crimes. And if you've never seen it, I think you would really like it. It's on Tubi and Vudu. You'll have to watch it with some commercials. But it is a real mental, intellectual thriller, and well worth watching. And the end definitely caught me by surprise. I mean, I kind of started putting the pieces together as it was headed towards the end, but then at the end, it's like, holy crap. So definitely check that one out. Time Crimes on Tubi or Vudu app. Really, really good. And the good thing about it for me is when I watched it, I had to really focus on it because of the closed captionings, because I don't speak French or whatever they were speaking. And then the last one, really excellent. It's on Netflix. It's called Major Events of World War II in Color. If you are a history buff, or if you have never even heard of World War II, I highly, highly, highly recommend this. It gives you World War II in a pretty good nutshell, but it hits a lot of the real major issues of the war. Some of the controversial stuff, like the bombing of Dresden, which was a firebombing that just destroyed the whole town. But the Nazi propagandists used it against the Allies because they published that there were like 250,000 people killed, which wasn't true. But they made it look like the West, the Allies were really as bad as the Germans. So check that one out. It is, like I said, it's on Netflix, but Major Events of World War II in Color. Fantastic, fantastic show.
Cool. All right. Is that all you've been watching? Anything else?
Those are the
besides
major
the other
things.
movie you reviewed earlier that you thought like you wanted to poke your eyes out?
Yeah, no, I'm not even going to ever mention that one again. Till next week when I slam it a little bit more.
Well, with my father-in-law visiting, we've kind of gotten into the habit of wanting to watch a movie almost every night, something that he would enjoy, so that we could do together. Maybe put the dinner plates around the coffee table or the side table, and just enjoy each other's time while we're watching something. So we watched a movie that I had never seen before with John Candy called Delirious. It was back in the 90s where he was a soap opera writer, gets in some kind of an accident, and in his recuperative state is suddenly living out a character in his own soap opera to where he can actually write scripts in his apartment or his hotel at night that come true the next day.
Sorry. I opened my phone and a video popped up. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. I'm so boring. I will do better. So after Delirious, which I had never seen, but it was a good John Candy flick. It was definitely a product of the 90s, had a 90s feel.
Yeah.
We went back to old school and watched Back to the Future 1 and Back to the Future 2. So we watched both of those. We're still going to watch, and we'll get it this next week, Back to the Future 3. But what a great trilogy Back to the Future is. 1, amazing unto itself. 2, suffers from the first 30 minutes when they go in the future. I know why they go in the future, but it feels cumbersome and muddy, and it just is a little weird, and it's not the future of 2015, because now we look at 2015 is in our past, and it's nowhere close. But when they go back to 1955 and there are two of the characters of Marty McFly, and you still got to remember to keep the one so he can get back, so that way he can do it again, and you start thinking the whole mind time loop. Fantastic. So really enjoyed it. Another movie we just got done watching, Gran Torino. Hadn't seen that in a while.
Fantastic movie. Great
Clint Eastwood flick. Had me at the end. I was freaking weepy-eyed. I'm just like, how does this movie get me? I mean, it just does. It's so good. If you've not seen Gran Torino, yeah, I'd seen it once before, so It's been a while. My father-in-law picked it up at a sale, went to a library sale. They were doing a Friends of the Library fundraiser, and they were selling some of their multiple copies of DVD, and he wanted to own it, and so we watched it. Our guest last week, I watch his YouTube channel pretty much every day. So I've been watching the Daily Doug, especially his Iron Maiden Mondays. Those are really cool. The charismatic voice, I love her, opera singer on YouTube who goes and rates metal and other singers. Did one on Ronnie James Dio and Holy Diver. Really liked it. Ashley Burton has become one of my favorite go-to. She has the Millennial Monday. She does a movie review where she goes and watches movies from the 80s and 90s that she's never seen before, has no idea who these people are, but watches it, and I get to kind of spontaneously pretend I'm watching the movie again for the first time through her eyes. Much like that, Popcorn in Bed is another YouTube channel I've subscribed to. It's a movie reaction channel. Check it out. I've been on a Lord of the Rings thing lately. I don't know why. It just has popped in my head. I haven't binged watched it in a while, but I subscribe to a channel called Nerd of the Rings. It is a Tolkien guy who will help explain the Tolkien universe, not what we've seen in the movies, but he will talk about the movies, but the true, like, literal ages of history that Tolkien wrote. And it is so, for me, just, it's addictive, which led me to Listening In, which is a guy who is a music person who looks at soundtracks and breaks them down and explains why they affect us, and then plays clips of the movies that they go with. So it's movie scores and how they affect us. So Listening In, which led me to a guy who I hope we can maybe get on the show, Rick Beato, who does this What Makes This Song Great. Have you ever listened to any of his YouTube channel episodes where he breaks down a song and says, what makes this song great?
I have not.
Check it out, Rick Beato. It spells like Rick Beat-O, but it's Beato. Check out his channel. It's awesome. And I watched one last night on Comfortably Numb. My all-time favorite Pink Floyd song was fabulous. So that's what I've been watching, and I guess it's kind of listening to, but it's also because it's on YouTube. I had a busy week watching shit.
Yeah, you did.
Which we're going to make up for the fact that I have nothing I've read this week. So I can just tell you right now, I got nothing in the next segment.
Well, good. I've got two things I could mention real quick in the reading section. There's a book that I alluded to earlier called Propaganda. It's by Edward Barnes. Definitely worth picking up. Gives us a good overview of what propaganda is and what to look for. Old book. It's great. The second thing that I'm reading, and I've been reading this one for a week or two, is Star Trek: The 50-Year Mission by Edward Gross and Mark Altman. Highly recommended if you're a Star Trek fan. Definitely check that out. You can find it on Amazon or just about any place else. But the layers involved in Star Trek and how miraculous it is that show ever made it on TV it's really an amazing story. So if you're a fan, you definitely want to check that out.
Can I just say something for folks who know Star Trek? Do you realize how much you have Lucille Ball, of all people, to thank for helping make it even happen?
If it isn't for Lucille Ball, Star Trek does not exist.
How? I went like 48 of my 50 years not knowing that. And then all of a sudden I was like, what? And I'm still, to this day, blown away that I think about Desilu Studios, about Lucille Ball and her relationship with Gene Roddenberry and with the studios, and saying, I believe in this. Let's make it happen. And putting her, was it like the mob thing? I vouch for. I'm going to vouch for this guy. Like Lucille Ball vouched for this idea.
Well, and you think about what the world is like without Star Trek. You probably don't have Star Wars. You probably don't have all the nerd conventions that we have today. You probably don't have Sci-Fi Network. You probably don't have I mean, so much of the stuff that we know about and enjoy watching and entertainment probably does not exist without
Mhm.
Lucille Ball.
Isn't that wild?
It's crazy. It's crazy. Totally bananas.
All right, let's go to what we're listening to as we start to wrap up the show. I know it's a little bit longer, but you know what? The guest was fantastic, so I can't fault the guest. It's our fault. We didn't know how to hone the guest in. We just let the guest go crazy, which is fine.
That
What have you
dude's
been
a
listening
talker.
to, Walt?
Okay, so I have actually been appearing on Office Space Minute this week. So check that out. That's a lot of fun. One of our guests, or I guess we've had one of those guys on our show in the past. David Smith is the host, and they really do a great job of covering the movie Office Space in a very compact format. They kept me to under 30 minutes. So they did a great job, 30 minutes per episode. But if you are a fan of Office Space, this is one of the best movie by minute breakdowns I've run across. So those guys have also done the Airplane Minute and one other, Top Secret Minute. So check those out as well. But Office Space Minute, they're really doing a fantastic job. And like I said, I appeared this week for several minutes. Also, I'm still listening to Camp Hell and Awakey. Definitely check that out if you're interested in true crime and psychological stuff. And this is a true story of a camp in Douglasville, Georgia, that was built to treat kids who are having problems like drugs or emotional issues or whatever. And they were totally taken advantage of by a piece of garbage who ran that place. And it's really sad. It's very sad.
It's when you told me the high level the last time you were telling me you had just gotten into it, I had remembered hearing about the name of that camp, the name of that facility, and I'm appalled.
It is appalling. It is appalling. And people who are entrusted with the care of children who totally broke
especially
the
at their most vulnerable with something that they're trying to overcome an addiction and they're being taken advantage of. It infuriates me. Let's just say
it does.
Thank God I don't come across that guy with, I don't know, a basic hand weapon in my hand.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would stand in line for the opportunity. So, and then finally, In the Red Clay. It's I know I've mentioned it before. They've got a couple of new episodes coming out this week, apparently, but they talk about the Dixie Mafia and a terrible person by the name of Billy Sunday Burt, who was a Georgia Dixie Mafia redneck moonshine drug dealing scumbag. So it's extreme. I mean, it is very entertaining. A great job by the folks who put that one together. So that one is called In the Red Clay. You definitely want to check that one out.
And I can do this very quickly because I've just got a couple of things. Because of all the things I've been watching, haven't had as much chance to listen, but I have kept up on top of the episodes of 60MW podcast from my buddies in the UK. They put out shows every Monday and Thursday, sometimes bonus on Saturday. So there's always something every week new to listen to, almost always related to entertainment, culture, something that's going on, if non-political, very much about what's happening in the world of music, movies, and entertainment. The Indiana Jones Minute came back a few weeks ago, and I've been catching back up. They took a long hiatus from the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull when the outbreak started, and now that they're coming back, they've basically admitted this movie is so arduous and so difficult, and they'd rather do something else, but they want to finish it. So what they've decided is now they're at a point where they're only releasing 1 minute a week. They're just doing it on Mondays.
Oh, wow.
So rather than a minute a day to try to wrap the movie up, and they tongue-in-cheek said, this way it leads up to Indiana Jones 5, which only just now started filming in the UK.
Ugh.
So check out those guys because Jerry, Tom, and Pete are so funny. Half the time when they're analyzing the minute, they're rarely talking about the minute. They're talking about anything else but the minute, but that part is funny as well. Those guys are great. And by the way, go back and watch or listen to and binge the first 3 seasons where they do Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Temple of Doom, and the Last Crusade. Great, great guys, great podcast. And finally, And I said it again because I got caught into the whole, I've been on a Lord of the Rings, just it's been in my head. I've been watching YouTube channels. I've been watching things about the music, the analysis. I have in my spare time when I'm making dinner or whatever, I've been just playing the Lord of the Rings score from all 3 movies and just in my head reliving pieces of what was my favorite film of all time.
Well, nothing wrong with that. That's some great music to binge on.
It's so good. You could listen to it having never seen the movies and go, this is really evocative. I feel like there's something happening here because it is really a true composition in the style of Mozart and other of the classic composers who really wrote music that before there were movies were writing music that in your mind you could close your eyes and imagine an entire story taking place.
Well, jumping back to the Indiana Jones minute real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when Tom came on and he was so excited about starting Crystal Skull and he just said, we're going to really find the gems in this pile of manure? It's funny that they can't find any gems in that pile of manure.
Well, here's the crazy thing. If you listen to the episodes, each minute, if you only watch that minute is actually very well directed, very well lit. It's very engaging. It's the story when you pull back and watch it all consecutively. So it's ironic. They ran into this problem with their second season with Temple of Doom. If you watch Temple of Doom and don't slow it down, don't analyze it 1 minute at a time, you go, oh, this is fun and it's crazy and it's wacky. And of course, it's gross out, but that was fun when we were kids. But when you slow it down, you go, none of this really feels like Indiana Jones. It's like it only works when you watch it full speed. The exact opposite is happening with season 4. They're going, when you stop each second or each minute, it kind of feels okay. But when you watch it, it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So
it kind of does.
And a lot of it is there's no concept where that story is coming from, where it's going to. It's like they just were writing on the fly and hoping that a guy in a fedora is all you needed to make the movie work.
Yes. Yeah. It's sad, isn't it?
It's sad. And they're doing Indy 5. We'll see. I'll give it the benefit that maybe they learned their lesson. It's a different director. Spielberg's not involved. Lucas is not involved. Maybe it'll be all right. We'll have to wait and see. I will be pleasantly optimistic about it.
I'm trying to be optimistic about it.
You know what? One thing I'm going to end on, and I know, God, this is going to be our longest show so far.
Yeah.
When we get done, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to start Loki so I can talk about it next week because Loki, thanks to Tom Hiddleston saying, I don't want to drop on a Friday. Everybody drops on a Friday. The other 2 shows dropped on a Friday. I want to drop on a Wednesday. So here we are. We're recording. It's midweek. So by the time we get back here, I will have finally had a chance to see the first episode of season 1 of Loki.
That's right. And BK has already raved about it. So
yeah, well, it's BK. So
yeah, I was going to say, so we still don't know what to think about
it. Consider the source. I always think about that when somebody gives me a rave. I consider the source and then move along.
Yes.
So, all right. We always do this. I give it to you. How do people find us?
The best place to find us is either at our website at thewilderride.com. On that website, you're going to find our bios and everything there is to know about our show, including guests and everything else. I guess we could also put up an application to become an FBI agent for future potential guests to come on and tell us about their career 25 years from now. We also have a Facebook group, and you definitely want to join that Facebook group. It's a lot of fun, great folks in there. Go to facebook.com/thewilderride. Follow us, and then a button's going to pop up to join our listeners group. Hit that button to join our listeners group, answer the 3 questions, and then you're in. No politics, none of that nonsense. Just good old-fashioned entertainment and fun and news about the show.
And as I often say, if you've been listening and enjoying this, use the share button on whatever podcatcher you're listening to and share it on social media. Help us spread the word. And if you have an extra few seconds, rate and review. We always appreciate that. It could use more of those folks out there letting everybody else know what they thought of our show, our podcast, as well as the episodes. And come on back next week because we always have a brand new guest coming into the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. Next week, Jeff Lieboff, one of the co-hosts of Radio Labyrinth. We've had Tim Andrews a bunch of times, but we've never had Jeff. So it's a very first. Well, we've had Jeff when it came to talking about Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, but we didn't do an episode spotlight on him as a guest in our listeners' lounge. So it's a debut in the lounge. So come on back and check out Jeff Lieboff from Radio Labyrinth, which, by the way, I left it off the listening to, but I didn't mean to not listen to. It's just this week is the one time I got to catch up. I will catch up, but it's a great podcast. Check out that one too.
Awesome podcast. One of my favorites.
So come on back next week for another edition of the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge.
Yeah. Who do we have next week? Oh, Jeff. Yes.
Yeah, Jeff. Right. You know, it's going to be such a letdown after your dad this week. I mean, we're just going to have to. You know what? I'm going to tell Jeff. You know, eat the gummies, hit the bong.
There you go.
Lick the acid. I don't care. Whatever you got to do, because it's going to be a hard one to try to beat your dad.
Yeah, it's always hard to beat my dad. I
mean,
threw one punch at my dad and I got beat myself. So.
I have to tell you the time that my dad actually did a right cross. It's the time that changed my life. I'll tell you that.
I bet it was.
But I never got touched again after that. But the fact of the matter is, I nearly fell to the floor. So, head punches really do knock people out. You're not careful.